especially in a city like Chicago at a time such as this. I'm going to ask that as we facilitate this conversation with somebody that I just adore, when they called and asked me to do this, I didn't even know the date. I was like, I am so there, right? I am honored to facilitate this conversation. But, you know, we have conversations about wealth building in the Black community often, especially like on a station like VON that's talk, and it's the bedrock of who we are as we progress in this country and in the world for our families, right? I want to ask one thing, that we give ourselves some grace. We got to give ourselves some grace on this topic. And it came to me that we deserve some grace on this topic because I learned so much from our Latino brothers and sisters since I have this Spanish station. We have honest, courageous conversations about how people come to this country and the expectation of it. And why there's often some discourse between these two emerging populations. And my friend Alex once told me, she said that people don't understand why Black people are not further along in this country. Why we're not further along, right? And I had to level set for her to tell her, it is different when you come here working. When your mindset is never really to do anything but serve, never own, right? And when you get to come here in one generation, because you look at it as a land of plenty, and you come here to make a difference for you and your family, and you're able to do it because of opportunity. And despite all of it, it's still the greatest country. I love America, I do, but I want us to do better in America, and I want America to do better by us. And that's the conversation that I want to foster this morning with Professor Melissa Harris-Perry. Now, let me tell you, many of you all know her from MSNBC, but Professor Melissa Harris-Perry is the Maya Angelou Presidential Chair in the Department of Politics and International Affairs, the Department of Women and Gender Studies, and the Program in Environment and Sustainability at Wake Forest University. She's also on the almanac for having the longest title in the world. I just said that, didn't I? There she teaches courses on American politics at the intersections of race, place, and gender. She serves as host and managing editor of The Takeaway, a daily national public radio program and podcast distributed by WNYC and PRX. Professor Harris is a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institute. She is an award-winning author and a sought-after public speaker, lecturing widely throughout the United States and abroad. Professor Harris-Perry received her BA degree in English from Wake Forest University and her PhD in political science from Duke University. She studied theology at Union Theological Seminary in New York. Professor Perry previously served on the faculty at the University of Chicago. That's where I came to know her, as well as Princeton University and Tulane University. She has numerous honorary degrees, not going through all of them. We'll be here till tomorrow. She serves on several boards as a trustee of the Century Foundation, the Next 100, and the Markup. She and her family live in North Carolina, but she's here with us today. Chicago, let's give her a big Chi-Town welcome.
We're actually doing a whole American flag thing here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Welcome to one of your homes.
Listen, I still think of it as home. So I guess I moved away in, what was it, 2005, 6-ish? But my elder sister remained here in the city, raised her children here, put them through Kenwood High School and got them off to college. So there was a lot of back and forth. Every summer my oldest daughter would come and stay. Yeah. So Chicago is very much.
Yeah, well, you got great seeds wherever you plant some roads, girl. Some roads. Listen, many people are celebrating, well, all of us in this room are celebrating Juneteenth this weekend, Monday.
I'm gonna blame y'all. Now let me explain what that, look, people are like, wait, what's happening? But I want to talk about this for a second, because I do think it goes to some of the bigger strategy questions. I don't know if y'all want to talk some of these things. And we've been talking about this a little bit in our family, in part because celebrate is part of what we do.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a troubling word for me, relative to Juneteenth, right? If I'm celebrating Juneteenth, I'm in a very particular community, right? Because you can only celebrate it in the context, let me mark the date. I'm marking Juneteenth. I'm commemorating Juneteenth. I'm remembering and thinking and reflecting on Juneteenth. And I'm, taking a little time off of work and relax with my family and that kind of thing. The problem with it being a national holiday, beyond the Walmart ice cream.
Right.
If I need to explain why that's a problem, just get on your phone for a little while and it'll be done soon. But it is difficult for me to hear, Happy Juneteenth! Happy Juneteenth, happy day when we told y'all to, and happy to say that you moved among the legally enslaved.
Say it.
It's very, so as we talk about the wealth gap, you gotta remember how the wealth gap is connected to all of these other things. And Juneteenth is a story in part about time, and it's a story about effective time. So as you were level setting, what does it mean to, farther along what? It is extraordinary that we exist, full stop. Right, farther along. Trauma changes your DNA. Trauma changes your DNA, and we are from a people enslaved, not for years, not for decades, for centuries, who built a nation. Our DNA changing at every point in the context of trauma. Finally, there comes a moment when, to be clear, Black folks are always free. We're always free. There are no slaves. No person is born a slave. All people are free. We are simply enslaved, right?
That's right.
So no person is born a slave. Every person is born free. But we were enslaved. Finally, the enslavement ends. And then let me tell you, for 2.5 years. I just want you to think about how long COVID has felt. Right? If you think, because 2.5 years is nothing in time. Just think about what 2.5 years is. Think of the people we lost. Think about your family members, your friends who you lost during COVID. That means that people died enslaved who were not actually still enslaved legally. So happy Juneteenth can never work for me, because Juneteenth is a commemoration of the theft of time, the theft of freedom, and the participation in a massive lie that continues even one day more, 1 month more, 1 week more. You think about justice denied. So the problem for me with it being a national holiday is it does turn into happy Juneteenth. It does turn into everybody gets a day off. And look, let me be clear. Martin Luther King Day I feel differently about. I was going to ask you. Martin Luther King Day is a different thing. He is an American hero. He is a statesman and a leader. The recognition of King as belonging to the whole story really matters. Juneteenth, there are actually different sides in the Juneteenth story.
So is it sacred for you? Should it be a sacred holiday maybe?
It's less sacred than Easter. Right? And everybody gets Easter.
Right.
Whether or not one is a believer in the risen Lord, everybody gets Easter.
Yeah.
It's more that I don't like empty symbols. I like symbols. I'm a big fan of symbols. I like a symbol. It's not that I don't like symbols, but I worry when our symbols are either empty or deeply confused about the fact that there were in fact literally different sides on the Juneteenth question, and that some were enriched and some were impoverished because of the things that happened at Juneteenth march.
So you won't be flying a red, black, and green flag after party?
No, I will. The problem is, we're gonna have some difficult interactions with some of my colleagues because they have Juneteenth, and then they got to hear that whole little speech.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that Juneteenth, though, moves us closer to reparations? Because we are having a conversation, because people are paying.
That is a fine and good question. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe, possibly. At my most optimistic, and I am deeply optimistic. So possibly, but again, I do worry that it becomes. I don't want it to be a story story about how the Good White Folks came and told us we was great. And I just want us at the center of our own story. And I kind of like that part of Juneteenth all through growing up was a little bit of stealing away the freedom. It was like, they don't even know it's a
What
holiday.
Juneteenth is.
Right? They don't even know it's a holiday. We out here having a full-on parade.
Yeah.
And that actually, again, when we think about what we learned from our indigenous brothers and sisters and our Latino brothers and sisters, and even our white immigrant brothers and sisters, that part of what you do is you combine and you grow, but you also preserve a little.
Yeah.
You keep, you keep a little in the garbage. You don't tell all about the kitchen. You just keep some of that. Yeah, you just go ahead and you let that be a little bit of internal conversation because it's part of how you pass on the narratives, the language, the discourse,
Sure.
My queer friends know I'm an ally, so they tell me some of the things, but not all the things. Because part of what is important is to be able to be in community and then also to share.
Yeah.
But I have a whole red, black, green outfit. That's a whole.
Great. Okay, so last weekend, my husband and I were riding to an area in Chicago that when 30 years ago, we were first looking to buy our new house, was known as the Gap. You want to know where the Gap is, right? And I'm sharing this story to lead into my next question for Professor Harris. And the Gap was all the rage. It was Black middle class people moving back into their communities. They were rehabbing brownstones. It was the neighborhood that you should move to, right? And then the Gap stalled. It stalled. Go a little further north, and then there is the South Loop. And the South Loop just took off, right? Right next door. Same kind of strategy, new neighborhood near downtown, right? And I thought about this when we put this question together. You lived in Chicago in the early 2000s while you were at University of Chicago. You know Chicago is known as the Tale of Two Cities, with residents of affluency, mostly white neighborhoods, enjoying benefits of this world-class city, and many of in the African American community just living like they should, right? What do you think can be done to address that aspect of the racial gap?
An enormous challenge. Right? So again, I love that you started thinking about history, and I do want to say, if any of these problems had easy solutions, or even clear solutions, but were hard to get to, our people they'd have figured it out for us.
Yeah.
Right? So I think I'm pretty smart, pretty cute, pretty hardworking. I have nothing on Idlewild. Nothing, right, on Idlewild. Right? I've got nothing on the courage of Daniel Tamer. I think about the fact that Anna Julie Cooper, from the center I run, is named, had an entire career, was 50 years old, learned to speak French, went to the Sorbonne and got a PhD, right? Yeah. From the Sorbonne in France, because she was irritated by how her job situation had gone down in DC. I got nothing on Anna Julie Cooper. I will not be learning French and then writing a full dissertation in another language, okay? So they worked tirelessly, and if it were simply that if we worked hard enough and thought hard enough and were smart enough and cute enough, that we could just beat the system or alter white supremacy, I promise you they could have handed us that like this. They would have been like, oh, here you go, Angel, right? So I do want to acknowledge that we've got lots of tools. All of those tools are incomplete, and that we're going to need everybody's genius. Yeah, that's first. That you've asked an extremely hard question. Within that context, I'd suggest just a couple of things. So one, there is this challenge when we understand how systems work, how economies work, how neighborhoods work, and how they work for some groups, and then presume that can then be laid on top of all others, right? Because it leads us to making our models a little too simplistic. So people often hear homeownership is the tool of wealth creation, right? There's a good reason why you hear that. It is empirically accurate, right, relative to Americans and what an investment in a home does over the long term. So then we think the solution, therefore, is simply to do that. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it at all. But we do have to recognize that this is my house, and it's got 4 walls, and it sits here. And this is your house, and it's got 4 walls, and it sits here. How do I determine the value of this house over that house? It really doesn't have nothing to do with the 4 walls. Right? This is like this is the critical thing. If your house is here, my house is here, how do I know how much that house costs? Is it because all 4 wall houses cost $10? Y'all know the answer.
Yeah.
Location.
Right.
Which is what you started with, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a hot location.
Right.
Okay. So here's the thing about that. We done moved all that up here. Friend. Location. Oh, what happens to the value of the home? Now, no one wants to hear that, because that sounds crazy to me. Okay. It is, I'm not saying that because we bring the value of a house down by our genetics, or our blackness, or our brownness, but because the nature of a system that values not the 4 walls per se, but rather where those 4 walls are located, and where anti-blackness is infused in the depths of our skin and our soul and our pinkies and our toes, that our 4 walls and owning them, that if tomorrow we leveled the playing field in terms of actual home ownership, we still would close the racial wealth gap, because our presence makes the communities less valuable to those. Okay, so this is very challenging, all right? It means we have to measure the value of the communities differently. It means that if dollars and cents are the only thing that we are talking about, anti-blackness is a thing that has actual dollar and cents economic consequence, not only in decisions that are made about who has access, but after access, whether that thing remains valuable. It is worth noting that after a black man was president, the next man never even held office at the level of dog catcher. Let me say it one more time. Sometimes moving into a house as a black person will reduce the value of the neighborhood. And after a man who has a Harvard law, who's distinguished, it seemed like, well, that dude, he ain't never even been on the city council. But I mean, black guy did, so.
Right.
Now, I want to be clear, nobody's sitting at the table saying that. I'm talking about how the valuation, how anti-blackness becomes a wage theft reality. That we make anything so. I say all that to say, we got to think very carefully about revaluing home ownership in a way that values homes, not exclusively by 4 walls, and not exclusively by a market condition, but actually says homes must be valued by the level of racial integration within the space that they are in. These are changeable. We think that a house is just what you can get. We can, in fact, revalue all kinds of things. And there's 2 ways you can do it. One, you go on Realtor, home buyer, whatever, and there's 2 things people look out for, right? They look at the house, they look at the crime stat, and then they look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 public housing, I mean, public school rating. Change how public schools are rated. If your school is overwhelmingly white, you cannot have a 10, full stop. Any school that is at 80% white or more cannot have a 10, because we are going to give an actual wage value, actual merit value to integration.
So are you saying, you look at a city like Chicago, which is probably the largest integrated, segregated city in the country, right? Chicago is.
Devalue Lincoln Park because it's too white. Devalue the homes in Lincoln Park because they're, and If they are not affirmatively furthering fair housing, which we can tell by the level of racial integration, guess what? You don't get no federal money for roads. You don't get no federal money for water. You literally, and so I know you don't say go devalue. You say, hey, we have a federal mandate, right, to integrate communities, and not just to kind of allow them to be integrated, to affirmatively integrate them. The federal government has the power to withhold, i.e. devalue. So unless your school is at a certain level of integration, it cannot receive a 10. Full stop. I don't care what it is. Unless your community is at a certain level of integration, it cannot receive certain kinds of federal, state, city, and local benefits. You have to actually make, because I don't think parts mind are great. Incentives are even better. And when there is an incentive for something to happen, and that incentive has economic value associated with it, watch it happen.
Professor Harris, that was so deep, you just broke my glasses. That was deep. But it leads to our next question. But before I go to it, I want to mention this young lady in Chicago named Tanika Johnson, who does the Forward Net Project. You know, Tanika? And for those of you who are not familiar, you've got to check out her documentary, where she actually took a map of Chicago, she folded it, and she took someone who was at 6400 North, I think Hermitage, and 6400 South Hermitage. The people who lived at 6400 North Hermitage, housing value was 500,000. The 6400 South Hermitage was 60,000. White North Hermitage, black South Hermitage. And what she did was she put the families together to get them to talking. It is so powerful, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it.
And I'm gonna say, in a city like Chicago,
Yeah.
literally the N and the S can make hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference. And I mean, like just, you see it in DC,
Yeah.
that Northwest versus,
Yeah.
and then, but you also see it change over time because we see neighborhoods are not stable, right? Things move in that make them more valuable, things move out, but you simply don't have to give tax credits to locations that are not sufficiently integrated.
Which leads to our next question on what role does our politicians play in this? This sounds like a government mandate that would have to take place, and you would have to get them involved, I think, right? What role do they play?
So it's both our elected officials, which matters a lot, but also a lot of these are laws that are on the books. It's a question of how, so think of it's sort of two pieces of our government, right? One is our elected officials, one is the people who do the things, right? So when we're talking about HUD, we're talking about sort of the enforcement arm of a 1968 law that already exists. You don't need a new law on that. You need a new way of imagining it. Again, not even, you just really need to read your drawing on that, which is kind of flat. What I would say is policy matters, and that some policy is coming from elected leaders, some policy is coming from those who are making policy in a variety of spaces, whether it is in banks, whether it is, right, people make policies. We heard some of those policies here, right? Guaranteed income. Guaranteed income, we just know works. And it's very challenging, again, because our understanding, the way we've talked over time about what makes people wealthy and not, makes us think that good decision making is what makes people wealthy, right? That if you make good choices, I gotta tell you, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's different for white folks, but for black people, the best budgeting, most saving, most philanthropic, most giving, and this is not just me saying this, this is a lot of data on this, are poor black people. So poor black people give more philanthropic dollars. We don't call them philanthropy, we call them not.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Black middle class folks, we don't tithe the way that our much lower income black colleagues. It's not even close. And in fact, if you look back at the 2008 economic crash, with the big philanthropy, with billions of dollars in endowment, they shut the doors. They're like, whoa! No, you can't. We don't just have to sit still for a minute. Poor people's giving in this country shot up. Gave more money to their churches, more money to their soup kitchens, and then tied not only money, but also tied time, right? So some of this is happening in religious spaces, but I just want to be clear. Both center and in sacred spaces. So the most budgeting, when I tell you that my grandmother could, when I think of what she made stretch, yeah. I would suspect that some people in this room know how much, I mean, I know everybody knows how much a gallon of gas costs. It's kind of like, woo! Just don't want to talk about it. But how many people in the room know how much a gallon of milk costs? And specifically, how many people in this room know how much a gallon of milk costs at 3 different stores that you can walk to? Because my grandmother did. Because she would walk to different stores to get the lessons. So she didn't need a lesson in financial literacy. Yeah. She didn't need a lesson in budgeting. She needed more money. She needed more money. Yeah. Because what she did with little money she had was really kind of magical. Yeah. So one of the things we really wanted to do is we look and we see there's a child care problem. Okay, let's fix the child care. We look and we see there's a food problem. Let's build a solution. This believes in the capacity of people that if you have more dollars, you'll make all kinds of choices. Now, one week you might get your hair done. Okay? Because you're a human person walking around on the world, right? So you might get your hair done one week. That is not going to close the racial wealth gap one way or another. Do not let anyone tell you that. The next week, though, what you're going to do is invest a little bit more in some savings. Or maybe you're going to pay off your credit card a little bit. Or maybe your car is broken, you're going to put some brakes on your car, and there will be able to make people will make choices. Some will be great, some will be awful. Poor people's choices, however, will never sink the entire economy like rich people's bad choices do. So maybe we let the rich people have all the money and just make all kinds of wildly irresponsible choices. So guaranteed income programs get us out of people's businesses and out of their bedrooms and allow us to see what happens with the creativity and capacity of people who've already demonstrated their ability to exist in the world with very little, unleashes that. I believe in baby bonds. So baby bonds are every baby born. It's a publicly funded small trust fund that grows over time. Why is this so important? Because we can near solve elder poverty in this country. We damn near solved it. We made a decision about what we were going to do about elders, and it had multiplicative effects. Yeah. Hugely important effects. And then we make poor people out of our babies. So we have to solve childhood poverty, and children live with parents. So we don't have to get over it. That's going to mean we're going to have to help some grown folks as we help children. Baby bonds are one way to start to build those. I believe baby bonds are guaranteed income. Whatever our personal, moral, ethical position around the question of the termination of pregnancy is, lack of access to both reproductive care at every level and to abortion will make people poor, and almost overnight, and with generational consequences. The number one thing that affects the long-term health of women is their capacity to control their own fertility. In nations, in countries, in cities, in states, where women cannot control their own fertility, they live in poverty, and so do their children, and they do so for generations. Don't have to know exactly how we would make, or we can know exactly how we would make a decision about any of that. Yeah. But in a world where there are so few choices, what we do know is that if abortion becomes even more widely restricted, then poverty will increase no matter what other programs exist. And then the last thing I'd say is I think we absolutely must invest in health in very different ways than we currently do. If we are sick, if we are dying, if we are sad, if we are unable, if we are in fear, if our DNA is literally changing because of our trauma, cannot go. Yeah. I wanted to go back, but I don't have time to just kind of lean in a little more on the political apparatus that is currently in place and its role in Black wealth, especially when you say in the state of Illinois, we have more Black elected officials in the state of Illinois than any other state in this country. And when you look across this, just say the city of Chicago,
something's off there, right? Based on the conversation we just had. But we're gonna park that, to move to, a question around corporate America. So following George Floyd's death, a lot of corporations became self-reflect, right? Many of them moving to become more inclusive around investing in Black-owned companies. The theme for this year's summit is partnering to close the racial wealth gap. It centers on partnering. What are your thoughts on corporations partnering with communities and governments to address the issues of economic inequities? And then this two-part. Second, this movement, this whole intentionality around corporations partnering, is that a moment or is that here to stay? Is it a movement?
It's probably cyclical, right? I mean, and let me just say this. Again, I like symbols, right? So I would much rather live in a world where corporations are like, it's June Pride Month, let's paint it rainbow, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it would be really wickedly, wonderfully subversive. In fact, just give Black employees Juneteenth off, and this all the world looks like that. But I understand the legal and challenging reasons why that cannot happen. What I would say, however, is that there are parts of your corporation, so if you're doing your Juneteenth thing, that's great. Then ask yourself, is your janitorial staff in on Juneteenth? Right, so is your professional staff off and your janitorial staff is in, right? Because then you're backward, right? So even if you're like, if your Black staff are concentrated in particular spaces and they're lower level spaces, then what I would say is we've had a lot of conversations in these internal conversations with corporations about what's happening inside of the corporation, right? Like diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am at it. Again, all of that matters. But I'd also ask for a radical redistribution of interest, right? Radical redistribution of our interest in the most invisible members of corporations that keep things running. So the corporations for which I mostly work are universities. And you can bring a speaker, and then when the speaker, praise God for bringing the speaker, paying my baby's tuition, right? So nobody's mad about bringing the speaker. But if in bringing the speaker, right, no one on your custodial staff, no one on your janitorial staff, no one in your food service staff, no one in your non-professional facing forward staff even has an opportunity to go, but all of your professors, administrators, and students are there. I want you to radically redistribute that, right? I want you to ask not your students, faculty, and staff who they want to hear. I want you to find out, right, from the folks who are most concentrated. Right. So first, when you think internally, yes, how your junior associates feel matters, sure. But also ask about the distribution of interest, concerns, resources, healthcare in your organization to create justice. And the second thing I would say is that, again, symbols matter, the performance matters, corporations have bottom line. It is important that we don't tell corporations to change what their incentive structure is. We need to understand what the incentive structure is and then operate in a way that, again, increases that incentive structure to move towards racial justice, and particularly towards racial justice in the context of a wealth gap. So if there is a bottom line, profit-driven incentive, even if there's some set-aside for philanthropic, the set-aside for philanthropic is co-curricular. That's fine. How do you shift the curricular? So sure, go get those dollars, but when all the community organizations are all competing for the kind of philanthropic $1 billion, you have left alone the whole part that is the business itself, the profit-driven business itself. We have understood how to use the stick. That's an important thing to do. Boycotts and not buying. But how do you create the carrots?
So let me ask you a question. So that's the internal structures. Chicago Urban League, thank you, President Freeman. She deals with the external. She's on the front line interacting with these corporations about investing externally with companies, right? That really was illuminated after George Floyd in a way. And you used a very interesting word, Professor Harris, when you said philanthropy. And if we are going to survive, I have a broadcast business, but I'm an entrepreneur. It cannot be about philanthropic. It's got to be investment.
Return on investment. Sorry, we got a little 1 minute.
Right.
Back here.
Who's that now?
Right. So let me try to put it down. Okay. That's exactly right. Philanthropy leads you to the position of saying, we are a community that needs help, please help us.
Right.
Investment says we are a community with talents. We've actually already helped you. We have skills, we have talents. So part of it, and this is the media part, we have to tell our stories differently.
Yeah.
So if we tell the stories of our communities as stories that are exclusively about the help we need, as opposed to understanding the ways that we have already, we are the shoreline, we are the providers of help. We have already done that, but sometimes you cannot see the genius. And so our job in media is to reveal the genius, so that then Madam CEO can go out and say, you see this janitorial worker who just made $1 out of 15 cents? Wouldn't you like to give me 15 cents and we can make you $1 for it, right?
Yeah.
So, but unless
When you see this janitorial company, when you have been doing business for so long with a janitorial company and you have no diversity on it, I've got a best in class janitorial company
Yes.
that I'd like you to consider.
and that best in class janitorial company might come from the janitor. But
Yeah, that's true.
sometimes those of us who made it a little bit, we get real stressed out when people mistake us for the maid, for Chad.
Wow. Powerful.
You cannot hurt my feelings for that because my grandmama was the maid. And she was typically the smartest person in the room. She understood what was going on. She could make a wedding dress without a pattern. She was a freaking genius. Just no one saw her. So if you mistake me for Rosa Harris, that's all good. It tells me something about you. It don't tell me nothing about me. I have no shame in being made. I want us not only to have no shame in being made, I want us to find out what the janitor knows about how to run a janitorial business that we've never even thought about. So that when we are investing, we are not only investing at the top, and don't get me wrong, good God, invest at the top. Folks who have already, but we will not, very last thing, the racial wealth gap is highest with the highest incomes and the most education. The more education and income you have as a black person, the wealth gap grows. The black middle class isn't even at the middle of the white poor. Because wealth compounds.
Yeah.
So I just want us to be clear, you cannot individually educate or earn your way out of a wealth gap. Wealth and income are different. Black women lose wealth, I hate to say this, we lose wealth with college education.
Wow.
Because black women lose wealth, college educated black women lose wealth. Anybody know why? Hey, student loans, that's the answer. Right, it's not because we become dumber and can't balance our checkbooks, it's because we don't come from intergenerational wealth. So in order to get a college degree, we have to take heavy loans, but the job market remains what it is. So $100,000 for you isn't $100,000. $100,000 for you is $100,000 minus this, plus probably your grandma was the maid, so you are reaching back, and if she was the maid, it means she was a domestic worker, which means she wasn't eligible for Social Security. So you're reaching back to help out grandma. Also, you may have made it to college, but your brother, well, maybe not. So maybe he's got 2 kids, and one of them seems like a genius, so you're gonna give out a little bit of your money each month to make sure that your niece and your nephew are right. And when you move into your house, your value is gonna be flat.
Okay, so
So
stop
you
right there.
cannot, so just to say, it has to be policy.
I gotta get
You
this
cannot
question in.
individually.
They're pulling me, I gotta get this question in for you. All right?
I
love
will
this
hear.
because you talk about women, and this
Yes.
question is right there. So in your book, Sister Citizen, Shame, Stereotypes, and Black Women in America, you talk about the kind of stereotypes of Black women and the relationship to citizenship. We all know that there's a gender pay gap. You're talking about what we pay for schooling, and I think Black women are probably, I think we index as #1 now as the most educated, because we're going back to school.
Not quite.
No.
We enroll in college more than any other race, gender population, but college is a very broad term here. When we finish less, when we enroll, we take out loans, we have tuition dollars to pay back, but we often don't finish because again, student loans.
Right, but there has been progress. There's been progress. If you look at Chicago, you look at Ross Brewer, who's here in Chicago now, Walgreens CEO. You look at people people like Melody who is becoming the first woman to invest in on the Denver Broncos, right? That's increased, right? So what impact are Black women in positions having on reducing or improving the wealth gap for Black Americans?
None, the wealth gap is growing. I just want to be clear, it's not reducing, and we need to reduce it faster, it's growing. The answer is zero, because it can't be done individually. It wasn't done individually.
So will they have a broader, because of the power of their positions, can they cast a broader net? You look in Chicago, right? Mayor, president of the county, lieutenant governor, state's attorney, Kamala Harris, vice president, right? You've got women of power, right? And nobody can help.
No, it's not.
improve.
No, it's not that nobody can help. It's that these individual people becoming wealthier actually doesn't reduce the overall racial wealth.
Not going to becoming healthy, not going to becoming wealthier, but because of the power that they have. Is that a possibility?
So I'm just going back to policy here.
Okay.
So these women should be in these roles because they should be in them, right? So like part of what's going on here is like they're brilliant, they're capable, they're good, they're qualified. So we want all humans with those kinds of capabilities to go into the world and rise up. But it doesn't necessarily make the collective change because policy is not the purview of any individual powerful person in a system. And the vice presidency is the least powerful position in all of American politics, just FYI. I mean, I love Kamala Harris. We can't expect her from she might be less powerful than first lady, like just from a pure capacity to move policy. What I want us to just think about is on the broadest scale, and I want us to be careful because we should elect our best leaders. And we should elect our best leaders who also know us and speak to us and come back and tie to our communities. But to truly close the racial wealth gap, we must own land, not just housing. We need to own land. We need collective, cooperative efforts that we engage in together that may or may not include our elected leaders. That begins to make some difference. But I will finally say again, we also have to literally revalue systems so that systems are simply not valued at the same level if they are all white. We have to inject, this is a world of anti-blackness that even we suffer from. And we have to actively and affirmatively engage in things that might initially make us feel uncomfortable or seem a little like, isn't that not playing by the rules? And I would say, of course it's not playing by the rules. And I'm not suggesting, I don't believe, most people who talk about revolution don't even have time, so I'm not going to the revolution. I'm not talking about revolution, but I am talking about really shifting how we think about these things. So it's not just, can I have a little bit concern?
Yeah.
It is not expecting the change will come from the top, knowing that it will come from the bottom and from the middle, and that everything we want is to unleash the capacity of people by providing more resources for folks to do it. It is what happened in this country with the GI Bill, with the Interstate Transportation Act, with the FHA. These were massive investments made by the government, created a white middle class. The white middle class continues to benefit over many generations. There is no beef with that. It's just that it now has to, with equal intentionality, occur for black people. That's all I got.
That was my last question. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Don't leave. You got a dynamic panel coming that Gerald Denard is going to moderate on this very issue. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the conversation.